to create a naming standard for your DFS model, and this should teach you how to deal with the certain cases where player names are reflected differently in the different data sources that you use. So for example, I just put a couple names over here, but in Basketball Reference, you can see that two special characters, whereas when you pull his name from FanDuel or DraftKings, they spell it without any special characters. So this can be a huge headache if you don't know how to deal with it, and we're just going to take care of it right now so we don't ever run into that problem again. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to add a new column to all of your worksheets titled standardize names. You can see I added one here right next to our player names on projecting player points. Then I'm going to come over to our today's lineup worksheet, and I'm going to add one here at the end. Then I'm going to come over to historical player data. I'm going to do the same. And you can either add one at the end or the beginning, but if you add one in the middle, then when you bring in new data, it can get a bit confusing. So I would stick with adding the standardized names column to the end of your data set or the beginning of your data set. And then again, I'll actually add this to the beginning here just to show you that you can do that as well if you like. Can't spell right now. But okay, so now that we have that out of the way, we're going to work on how we create our standardized names. And the way we're going to do this is through creating a naming standard and then using our Lookup function that we used in the last video. So first, to create the naming standard, we're going to create two columns. The first titled input names, and these are going to be the names that we take from the data sources, and we're going to look through and we're going to try and find our standardized names from. So that might not have been totally clear, but hopefully it will make sense in a second. And then our second column is going to be standardized names. Just to give you an example, and going back to the Luka Doncic one, it could be a case where we take the name Luka Doncic with the two special characters, and we return Luka Doncic, right? So to do that, we would use our Lookup function of the name in this column, and we would have our return value be the name in this column. And then we might also have, just to continue this example, we might also have an input name of Luka Doncic like that, in which case we would want to return the exact same standardized name. So whatever input name we had for Luka Doncic, our goal would be to return the same standardized name so that when we're using the standardized name to look up various values throughout our sheets, we're not going to run into any problems with the names being spelled or reflected differently. But that's just a quick example of what we're trying to do here. But now I'll get to how we're going to do it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get a full list of input names for every player in our data set. And obviously we're not going to have that in our today's lineup because this is only reflecting the players who are playing in the contests that we entered. But we do have that, luckily, in our historical player data, which has, I believe, all 479 players who have played a minute in the NBA this season. So you can copy that over, come back to your naming standard, and paste that in your input names. And the easiest way to kind of clean this, if you will, is to just create a new sheet, paste these names, and then what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to remove the special characters. So we can do this by Control F, and we're going to use the find and replace function in Excel. So you can see right now, I am going to find, and I'm going to grab this C with a line over it from Jokic, but I'm going to find all those C's, and I'm going to replace them with normal C's. And you can see that it made 10 replacements. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to find all the C's that are like the ones in Vujovic's name. I'm going to replace those with normal C's. and you can see it made 6 replacements. So there are a ton of those. I'm going to leave a link, I'm going to leave a list of all of the special characters that I use when I replace them in the description. So you can just grab those if you want to do the same process. But depending on kind of what source you use, if you're using basketball reference, that should cover it. But if you're using a different source, you might need more, you might need less, and it could be reflected differently. So I'm not going to go through every single one right now, but that's how that process would look. And then once you finish that, you should have cleaned up names. So once you have those clean names, you're going to paste them into your standardized names column. And you can see, since we did get rid of that C with the line over it for Jokic, his name is now reflected as it would be on FanDuel or DraftKings. Before we start looking up these player names and using our naming standard, we're going to format this data in a table. So I'm going to go Control-Shift down, get all the data. Then I'm going to go Insert and Insert Table. Don't change any of this. Table has headers, yes. And the data is what I just highlighted. Hit OK. And you're going to want to rename the table as well. So you can see right now it's named Table 2. But I'm going to change it to Naming Standard. Then I'm going to click off. And the reason we're going to do that is because when we use our XLOOKUP functions, it's going to be pretty easy to just refer to the table. And when we add or remove data from this table, we won't have to adjust our data range as we have been in the past. So now we can go ahead and we can start looking up our standardized names. We're going to use our XLOOKUP function. Our lookup value is obviously our input player name. We're going to look it up from this column. And the way we're going to do that is we're just going to refer to the table. You can see it pops up nicely here. So click on that. And then you put a bracket, and you can just write the name of the column that you want to refer to. And so that you can see is highlighted in blue. It might be hard to see because the table's blue as well. But that is just going to look through this entire column A. No matter how much data we add to it or take away from it, as long as it's in the table, it's going to look through it for us. So that, then we're going to do the same thing, but this time with standardized names. So remember, we're looking through column A for our player name, which was our lookup value, in this case Steph Curry, and we're going to return the standardized name. There you go. And then just going to drag this down, and I'm going to hit Control D. And you can see that for the most part, my standardized names are in this sheet. But obviously we still have some issues, and that's the second example I gave here. Because Kelly Oubre on FanDuel is spelled without the junior after his name, but on Basketball Reference and on some other sites, he's spelled with the junior. So the way we're going to have to deal with this is we're going to have to go directly into our naming standard and come all the way to the bottom and add Kelly Oubre. And you can just type beneath your table. But remember, I don't want to type Kelly Oubre Jr. I just want to type Kelly Oubre. And then for the standardized name, I do want to type Kelly Oubre Jr. because that's the standardized name we've chosen for him. So I hope that makes sense. But you can see here now, when I was looking for Kelly Oubre, it was able to find it because I just added it to column A in our naming standard. And then I also just added the return value, which was the same standardized name we had for Kelly Oubre in the first place. But then again, remember there's still some issues with looking up minutes because it's using this value in column A. So I'm going to need to change all of these to our standardized names. So I'm going to zoom forward past this process. But what you guys are going to do is you're just going to change every case where we were looking up with A5 to B5. We're going to look up with the standardized names now. Okay, so I've done that now. And then a couple final things I'm going to talk about here is it's nice that I've added the standardized names to this sheet, but I also want to make sure that I add them to every other worksheet in my workbook. So for example, I want to make sure that in my today's lineup, when I'm importing my player names in the future, I don't have to go through this process of creating a new standardized names. If I already create the standardized names here, then I can just drag the standardized names in right away. So you can go equals x lookup value of Stephen Curry. Lookup array is naming standard. Input names. Naming standard. Standardized names. Right? You can drag down. I'm just going to go to, I don't know, I went to 500 or whatever. And then again, this is a really nice way also to be able to check where your errors are. So I can see that Bojan Bogdanovic is returning an error right now. And just kind of from experience, I know that that's because he has a special character that I didn't clear yet in my naming standard. So if I wanted to fix that, I would have to go into my naming standard, add the input name to column A, and then add the standardized name to column B, and I would see it pop up here. So you would do the same thing here under standardized names. I'm just going to copy this formula because I don't want to have to repeat it every time. I'll go Beal. And obviously here we're not going to have any issues with player names because the input list we already used is the one from this data source, right? So hopefully that makes sense, but all the values in column A or all the player names in column A here are the ones I took directly from this data source. So when I'm looking for one of these players' names in column A, of course they're going to be here. And then finally, I'm going to standardize my names in my projected minutes sheet. And then again, Bojan would be a player who I'd have to go fix. Goran Dragic, Chris Dunn, Kevin Porter. And these are all just examples of a few players whose names I would have to fix. But the nice thing about creating a naming standard is that once you fix these players' names, you'll never have to do it again because that name is already corrected. It's in your naming standard, and you won't have to worry about dealing with that player's name reflected differently on two data sources in the future. So now I'm going to talk about one last thing we need to change, and hopefully you guys are able to catch this. But if you notice, I am now using my new standardized name to look up these values, but the array that I'm looking through is still my old player names. Because I just created the new standardized names columns here and here, but I haven't changed the array I'm looking through in my projected minutes sheet to match those standardized names, because I want to be looking with the standardized names through the standardized names so that I never run into any errors. And the way we're going to do that is we're just going to come in here. We have B5 as our lookup value, that's right. We know that our return array is still correct. So all we want to do is we want to change this lookup array. I'm going to delete it, come into our historical player data, and instead of using this column, which is what we were using before, we're now going to use our standardized names. Control-Shift down, and enter. And remember to lock these cell references. and then Control-Shift down to paste that down. So again, hopefully that made sense, but you always want to only be referring to your standardized names from now on, now that you've set that up. This way you know that you're always using the exact same format of the player name to look up the values in your worksheet. Then again, this one isn't going to be an issue because we took it directly from today's lineup. This one doesn't refer to player names, but this one does. So again, we're going to come in here. Our lookup value is our new standardized name, but our lookup array is still going to be our old names. So we're going to change that from this column, which it just was, to the new standardized names. Control-Shift down. And obviously this has to match up. Enter. So take a look at that. Again, hopefully you understand why we're doing that. Using just the standardized names. So looking up using our standardized name, looking it up in the standardized names column, and returning whatever value we wanted to return. Paste this down. And yeah, our worksheet should now be corrected for whatever name issues we might run into. Again, you're going to have to fix, or you're going to have to add certain players' names to the naming standard. I'll leave all the special characters in the description, so when you are cleaning up your list of names, you can do that yourself if you're using data from Basketball Reference. If you're not using data from Basketball Reference, then you might not need to do that. You might actually luck out and not have to worry about special characters at all. But alright, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, reach out to us at contactus@analyticscity.com, and I'd be happy to help you guys out.